Alright, today what we're talking about is how to find the midpoint. First of all, what do you think the word midpoint means? It's pretty self-explanatory. Middle? Okay, be a little bit more specific? Not necessarily. Alright, we got two words in this. We got midpoint. So what it literally means is the point that is in the middle. Okay, that's all it means. Now, specifically, it is in the middle of two other points. Okay, so right here where it says midpoint, all this means, it's self-explanatory, is this is the point in the middle of two other points. Nobody's writing this down. The point in the middle of two other points. Now, there's another word for that. In math, we call it the midpoint, but in general, if I told you I was going to meet you in the middle, what else would that might be called? Nobody got anything? Maybe halfway, right? If I was over here and you were over there and we were going to meet in the middle, we also might say, all right, I'll meet you halfway. The halfway point is the midpoint. Now, halfway, let me put that over here. That's like Arkansas country lingo, halfway. That just means the midpoint. How do you find half of something? That's the key to all of this, what we're fixing to learn. How do you find half of something? Okay, measuring it's going to give you the full length. If I want to know half, you got to measure it first, but then once you know your full length, what? How do you find half though? Sounded like you were onto something? Divide, exactly. Divide by what though? 2, right? So like let's say there was 100 feet between me and the door and I wanted to go halfway. Well, half of 100 is 50. We know that, but where does it come from? 100 divided by 2. That's 50. Okay? Alright, so let's look. These examples right here are really easy examples. So I've got point A and point B, and I want to find the midpoint, or the halfway point. Well, first of all, first thing is, how far apart are these two things? We can easily count and see that how many units apart are they? 4, right? From here to here, if we counted, that would be 1, 2, 3, 4 units apart. So altogether it's 4 units. So half of 4 would be what? 2, right? 4 divided by 2 is 2. So what that means is if I go over 2 spaces, 1, 2, this right here would be my middle point or my halfway point or my midpoint. And you should always be able to easily tell on the graph if it looks like it's the middle. Does this side and that side look equal? Here, from here to here, and from here to here, yeah, it is. They're equal. That means this is exactly the same on either side, so that's the halfway point or the midpoint. You're just counting and then dividing by what number? 2. That's how you find half of something. Now over here, just because my points are lined up like this, you do it the same way. You would count. Okay, how far is it from here to here? If I count 1, 2, 3, 4 spaces again, so what's half of 4? Anybody, what's half of 4? 2, so you take 4, you cut it in half, and it gives you 2. So that means if I count up 2 spaces, 1, 2, boom, that right there would be my midpoint or my middle point. Now, as always, in math, your lines aren't always going to be, or your points aren't always going to be straight across like this or like this. They might be at an angle, like a point here and a point over here. Well, you can't count that, okay? So that's where this midpoint formula comes in. Let's see. Let's put the midpoint formula right here. This is gonna look like quite a lot, but once I explain it to you, it's really not that complicated. Let's see. These are big on purpose. First of all, a point on a graph has an x and a y coordinate, right? Okay, so that's why I made this really big, because there's going to be an x coordinate here and a y coordinate here, and they are separated by a comma. Now, to find your midpoint, what you do is you take your 2 points that you already have, like this one, we already had A and B. You're going to add the x's together, and then you're going to divide by 2. And then you're going to add your y's together and divide by 2. This is your midpoint formula. I know it looks complicated, but it's really not. More than anything, I need you to be able to read this. Again, it looks complicated, but if you can read this, add your x's together and then divide by 2. Add your y's together and then divide, that's our symbol for divide by 2. And then boom, you get your midpoint. Okay? That's the midpoint formula. All right, so we're going to test it. Let's go down here to example 1. So I've got these points. I've got point T and point V, and I want to find the midpoint or the middle point between them. The first thing I would suggest doing is just going ahead and putting them on the graph. So if T is at -2, -3, let's see, we've got an X and a Y. To graph this, I'm going to go over to -2, and then I'm going to do what? Not yet? Go down, right? Negative number means go down. Go down, boom, right there, that is point T. Now if I'm going to graph point V, if my first number is 0, what does that mean? Do I go to the left or to the right? If my first number is 0, you stay still, right? If my first number is 0, stay still. If my second number is 3, I'm going to go up or down? Up, right there, that's point V. Now what I'm asking you to do in this example is to find the middle. You can always look and guess, right? Hopefully, if these are my 2 points, wouldn't you say the middle is somewhere in here? Somewhere in there, and you could probably guess and figure it out that it's probably this point right here, but I don't want guesses, okay? So we're going to use this formula. Add your x's and divide by 2. So here's one point, here's another point. It's always x, y, right? Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to add my x's together. This one's got -2 as an x. This one's got 0. I'm going to add those together, and then I'm going to divide by 2. Now, in the calculator, you can either type it in like this. Y'all remember how to type in a fraction? Personally, I don't like doing this, but you're going to do alpha, the green button, and then this one here, and then hit enter. Type all that in, -2 plus 0, divided by 2. And it gives me -1. So what that means is my first number is -1. Okay, then I'm going to do the same thing, but I'm going to do it with my y's. That would be the second number, right? This one's y is -3. This one's y is +3. So I'm going to add those together and then divide by 2. So in the calculator, -3 plus 3 divided by 2 gives me 0. So what that means is my midpoint is -1, 0. On the graph, do y'all know where -1, 0 is? If the first number is -1, that means you go over here. If the second number is 0, do I go up or down? Stay put. This right here is this point. Does this look like it's the middle of those two? And if you're ever unsure, sometimes it helps me for some reason to connect them. For some reason, when I have a line, I can really tell. Oh yeah, that's definitely the middle. Okay, that's your formula. That's all there is to it. Not too bad, right? All right, let's look at example 2. First thing that we want to do is we want to graph our points. -3, 3, and you got to do this correctly. -3, 3. So I'm going to go over this way and then up to 3. That's x. Now for y, I've got 1, 0. So go over to 1 and then don't go anywhere. That's y. Now to find the midpoint, this one's a little bit harder, but it's somewhere in here, right? Anytime I've got a graph, I like to visualize. Okay, I'm somewhere in here, and I don't know exactly where because there's not a point there, but I'm going to assume it's somewhere in this area. So let's do the formula. first thing is x, y. It helps to label them. X, y. Okay, I'm going to add my x's together. That is -3 and +1. We're going to add those together. -3, +1, and divide by 2. Now let me show you how I type this in the calculator. I hate doing the fraction thing. I just don't like it. I usually type in the top part, -3 + 1, press enter, and then divide by 2. And it gives me -1. If you type it in the other way, you'll get the same thing. I just don't like typing that in for some reason. Okay, so my first number is -1. Now I'm going to do my y's. The second one, which would be 3 and 0. And then divide by 2. Now here's the thing about this. If I type this in the calculator, it gives me 3/2. And I don't really know what that number is on a graph, right? 3/2, that's a fraction. Fractions are hard to find on a graph. So I'm going to type it in the other way. I'm going to type in the top, 3 + 0, press enter, divide by 2. That means that number up there that they gave me is actually 1.5. That makes a little bit more sense. What does 1.5 mean? No, 1.5, right? 1.5. Where is 1.5 on the graph? It's between 1 and 2, right? Okay, so let's find this point. First number is -1, so I'm going to go over here. And then I'm going to go up 1.5. So 1, do I go up to 2? No, I stay right between them. 1.5 would be right there. So that right there would be my midpoint. Does it look like the middle? I think so. Okay, one more thing I got to show you. When you're typing these in the calculator, again, the way I showed you to do it is to type in, like if I want to type this in, I'm going to type in the top, press enter, and then divide by 2. If you try to type it in all at once, -2 + 0 divided by 2, you will get the wrong answer. Okay? The answer was -1. That's what we got. If you try to type it in all at once, you will get the wrong thing. The calculator does it in the wrong order. Okay? So don't try to type it in all at once. Type in the top, -3 + 3, press enter, and then divide it by 2. And that's what we get. Okay? Alright, let's look at the back. How about you guys let's do example 3 together. Alright, so first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to graph my points. -5, 1. -5, 1. Here's A, right? For point B, I'm going to go to 3, 1. Now, if I've got this graph, in this case, it would probably be easier to not use the formula, right? If I want to find the middle, what should I do? If I don't want to use the formula, which you can use the formula, but if I don't want to, just count your squares, right? And then find half. So from A to B, how many squares do we have? Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So what's half of 8? 8 divided by 2 is 4. So that means count over 4 from either one of your points. 1, 2, 3, 4. Boom. That's my midpoint. Now the question is, what are the coordinates for this point? -1, +1. Good. Now, if you had decided to do the formula on that, it would have given you the same answer. But I like to not use the formula if I can. Okay, we're going to do one more together here, and then you guys are going to do one by yourself. Now here, no graph. Personally, I actually think it's easier without a graph because you don't waste your time with the graph, right? You just take the formula. So here's my first point, my x and my y. For my second point, x and y. If I'm told to find the midpoint, all you got to do is the formula. Add your x's. So my x is -1, and my other x is +5. Add them together. Divide by 2. Let's see what that gives us. Negative 1 plus 5 divided by 2. I get 2. That's my first number. Now do the same thing, but do it with your y's. So these numbers. 1 plus negative 5 divided by 2. 1 plus negative 5 divided by 2. I get negative 2, so that means my point is 2, negative 2. You don't have to check it on a graph. That's it. Trust the formula. It works. That's your answer. That's pretty easy, right? If you don't have to graph it, it's very easy. All right, you guys do example 5 real quick. Find the midpoint. Okay, let's look at example 5. So, first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to add my x's together. What's the x coordinate here? Which one of these? 2. And I'm going to add that to what? Negative 6. And then divide by 2. What does that give you? Excuse me, what does that give you? Negative 2. Okay, that's my first number. And then I'm going to do the y's. I'm going to add negative 1 plus 0 and divide that one by 2. That one's going to give me a decimal, isn't it? Negative 0.5. Negative 0.5. There you go. That's my answer. When you're doing this, you are always going to have two numbers, an x and a y. If you get finished and you only have a number, you've messed up somehow. All right, for 6 and 7, we're going to do the same things. If I don't give you the points, the coordinates, you really need to figure out what they are. I can't count the distance of this line, can I? I can only count them when they're straight up and down or straight over to the side, right? So what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to figure out what is this point. So does anybody know what coordinates that is? It's going to be negative 1, negative 1, right? I'm going to write that down over here. Negative 1, negative 1. That's my first point. How about the coordinates for this one? Notice this graph is counting by ones, even though they only put these on here. This is negative 1, negative 2, negative 3, negative 4, negative 5, and then negative 5. So my points, there they are. It helps to have the points. Write down the points. If they don't give them to you, write them down. It's too hard to count. So my x and my y, my other x, my other y. So to find the midpoint, we're going to add the x's together, these two numbers right here. Negative 1 plus 5, excuse me, negative 1 plus negative 5, divide by 2. Let's see what that gives us. Negative 1 plus negative 5, divided by 2. I got negative 3. Well, these are the exact same numbers, so you're going to get the exact same thing. So my other one is also negative 3. But if you do it again, you get the same thing. So that means, for example 6, my midpoint is negative 3, which on the graph would be right here. That one you probably could have guessed and got that, right? Example 7. All right, first thing is, what is the coordinates for this point? This is negative 5. 5, right? Negative 5, positive 5. Okay. This one is, what do we got here? 2, negative 5. Okay, I'm going to use those points and I'm going to find the midpoint. All right, my x's, that would be negative 5 and 2. Negative 5 plus 2 divided by 2. And I got negative 1.5. Okay. Now I'm going to do my y's. That would be 5 plus negative 5. I got 0. So that means that is my midpoint. That looks funny. That looks funny. But where would it be on the graph? Negative 1.5 would be right here, right? Between these two. Negative 1.50. All right, I'm going to give you a couple seconds here to do examples 8 and 9. Those are easy whenever you don't have a graph. Just do the formula. In about a minute, we'll go over those. Okay, I'm going to go over these. Do I normally make you guys memorize very many formulas? On test, I usually give you the formulas, right? This will be no exception. I'll give you the formulas. But this is not a hard formula to memorize. It's a weird looking formula, but it's not hard to memorize. The formula literally means add your x's, divide by 2. Add your y's, divide by 2. That's not a hard formula to memorize, even though it looks crazy. So, for example 8, it helps me if I label, this is x, this is y. This is x, this is y. So I'm going to add my x's, negative 4 plus 5, and then divide by 2. And then I'm going to add my y's, negative 1 plus 3, and divide by 2. What did this one give you? 0.5? Okay, so my first number is 0.5. And then what did this one give you? 1? There you go, that's my midpoint. 1/2, comma 1. For example 9, we're going to add negative 4 plus 2 and divide by 2. What did that one give you? Negative 1 sounds right. And then we're going to do the y's. 2 plus 2 divided by 2. 2 plus 2 divided by 2, and that is 2. So there's your midpoint. Again, you always will have an x and a y for your midpoint. Okay.